This is Protect My Town, a public affairs program featuring mayors from DuPage County and surrounding suburbs, talking about issues important to everyone who lives and works here. Hello and welcome to Protect My Town. We'll be introducing you to our panel of mayors in just a moment. I'm Don Weiss, your host. Today we're talking about the Local Government Distributive Fund. And despite the cumbersome name, it's something every taxpayer should care about. The state's budget deficit is threatening the $1.2 billion fund that cities and towns rely on for basic services. For nearly 50 years, Illinois' Local Government Distributive Fund, also called LGDF, has played a vital role for local municipalities. It pays for essential services, things like police and fire, streets and sewers, and snow plowing. Here's how it works. The state collects income taxes from Illinois workers. Through a formula based on population, a certain percentage of the revenue gets dispersed back to every city and town. Ultimately, those dollars play a crucial role in municipal operating budgets. But with another state budget shortfall looming, Springfield is looking to take more than $120 million in LGDF funds. And mayors are urging Springfield to resist any attempts to take the money. Municipalities, which have to balance their budgets every year, have made tough choices in recent years, reducing personnel, cutting services, and controlling spending. This comes amid rising municipal costs, particularly public safety pensions, and calls for a property tax freeze which will limit revenue. While they support fixing the state's financial woes, mayors say that Springfield's power play doesn't fix the state's problems, but merely shifts the responsibility, ultimately, onto local taxpayers. Now, you, the viewer, have the ability to let lawmakers know how you feel about this important issue, and we'll let you know how to do that during our show. But let me introduce you now to our distinguished panel of mayors. We have Mayor Martin Tully from Downers Grove. We have Mayor Kevin Burns from Geneva and Mayor Glenn Ryback from Wodsworth. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in and talking about this important issue today. Mayor Tully, let's start with you. For your community, your municipality in Downers Grove, what does the LGDF mean to your budget? Essentially, how much money in revenue are we talking about that comes through the LGDF funding to the village of Downers Grove? Sure,
and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this very important issue to all our constituents. For us, our share of the Local Government Distributive Fund in Downers Grove is about $4.5 million currently, which represents about 10% of our general fund, which is the fund that we use to provide basic services to our community. This is the operating fund. It provides things that I call sirens and snowplows, the important things that people count on every single day. Mm-hmm. Police, fire, and public works. Right. Mayor Burns, let's talk about Geneva now, LGDF. In terms of the overall makeup of your budget, how much are we talking about that comes through this LGDF revenue source to Geneva?
LGDF in Geneva represents approximately 20% of our general operating fund. Approximately $2 million a year we rely on from our friends. It's huge, and any portion of that being removed requires significant consideration, and I would argue significant pain to our residents as well.
And basic services, as Mayor Tully just mentioned?
Absolutely, it's invested in what makes our community special, and when you remove any portion of that money, then we risk the reputation of our community being hurt simply because of lack of services.
Mayor Ryback, let's talk about Wodsworth now up in the Lake County area, but LGDF is critical, I'm sure, to your municipality, your board, and your constituents. Let's talk about that.
Similar to Geneva, about 18.2% of our income, $361,000 is what we received in the last year. We use that to maintain our 33 miles of roadway, plowing, resurfacing, and so forth.
We've heard in all three of these cases, in all three of your communities, and I know that the example is similar elsewhere, these are basic services we're talking about. These are the things that I think your residents see. They like to see squad cars coming down the street patrolling. They want to have that snowplow coming in when it's necessary. And if it doesn't appear, that's when you gentlemen and your staff and your other elected officials, you get the phone calls at the City Hall, right?
That's correct.
We do.
That it's critical, right? Well, I want to make sure that our viewers know that you can go to protectmytown.us, where you can contact your lawmakers directly to let them know how you feel about Springfield's attempts to cut local funding to your communities. And as these mayors know, it's critical. What's also important, mayors, I think you'd all agree, is you have to balance your budget every year.
Yes.
You cannot do as perhaps the state of Illinois has done and not deal with it, save it for another time. So these 20%, 18%, all this money we heard about are real dollars and real services. So Mayor Tully, if you had to go to your village commissioners and say, we're going to have to sustain a 10% cut in the LGDF funds for those basic services, what would that mean to the Village of Downers Grove?
Sure. For the Village of Downers Grove, a 10% cut in our portion of LGDF would be about $450,000 less each year. And unlike prior situations where maybe the economy went south during the Great Recession and we had to account for a one-time hit until things got better, removing that from our budget every single year would be a huge impact. A $450,000 loss in revenue that we rely upon to provide basic services like police, fire, public works, code services, community development, and economic development for our community would be a big deal. And why? Because most municipalities are made up of people. Our operating budget is probably supports 77% personnel. So to take $450,000 out of our operating budget means a big reduction in personnel. Those are the people that provide those services that you mentioned that our residents count on and expect every single day.
You mentioned economic development. I think that's critical too. We're talking about, you said sirens and snowplows and such, but economic development, that's growth in your communities as well. Mayor Burns, talk about the impact to Geneva. A 10% cut would be huge to your budget because people would feel it immediately, and these services that are provided would impact your residents in your community.
That's true, and I would echo what Mayor Tully said as well. With respect to Geneva, a 10% cut is approximately $250,000. It doesn't sound like a heck of a lot until you dive into that budget and realize what needs to be eliminated. And the moment you discuss what services need to be either suspended or eliminated, whether it be economic development, historic preservation, roads, police, fire, then those discussions become very serious. And to Mayor Tully's point, it's a compounding problem. You know, my feeling is the era of collaboration with our friends in Springfield has gone from collaborative to now conscription of local municipalities' success in not just managing their money, but investing their money wisely. And so from an elected official's perspective, and I believe my citizens and my colleagues on the council would agree with this, we're frustrated with the state's inability to understand how well we're doing locally and how they can learn from us.
And those citizens are also the constituents
Absolutely.
of the elected representatives and senators who are going to have to cast
That's right.
very key, important votes on this very issue that we're talking about.
Precisely.
Mayor Rybak, I would imagine same issues dealing with that. What would a 10% cut mean to the Village of Wodsworth?
Our road program runs on a 15-year cycle, and it's about $800,000 a year to maintain that program. Losing those funds would stretch the program to a point where some of the pavement would deteriorate prematurely in advance of that 15-year cycle of repair.
And every citizen, every homeowner wants to know, when is our road going to be resurfaced?
That's right, the calls come.
They call,
Yes.
They love to hear when it's going to happen. A little bit of pain for that will go a long way once the road is resurfaced, because that's critical infrastructure. You don't want to drive down a road in a community that you know it could be better than that.
Exactly right. In fact, our residents supported a referendum to increase their sales tax by another penny in the last year or two, because that was important to them.
Exactly.
Right. And again, as we're talking now, remember that your citizens, the people who live in the greater suburban area here, rely on those dollars because they originated in your community.
Absolutely.
Those are
That's right.
income tax, typically income tax dollars that your citizens earned, worked, got a paycheck, sent that money to Springfield with the understanding from many years ago, decades ago, that that money was going to come back. And I think if we're not answering that, if Springfield isn't answering that end of the promise, that end of the equation, then there's something wrong there. There's an imbalance. Would you agree that that's something you have to address?
It's absolutely something you have to
issue?
address, because you go back in history and realize that there was a trade-off. The trade-off was that municipalities would receive a share of the state income tax in exchange for giving up their ability to have their own local income tax. So we gave up that right to collect that money directly from our residents and put it back into our own communities in reliance upon the state doing it and returning it to us. And now diverting that money away from where it was intended to go is a big problem. People need to understand that.
And to that point, are residents understanding this? Do people know what LGDF is, or do they really key more on those basic services that LGDF is funding? So maybe there's a little bit of a gap in just the basic understanding of what we're talking about here and why this is so critical.
That's right, and it was part of the 1970 Illinois Constitutional Convention, which established what you're referring to, Mayor. Yeah.
That's right.
Mayor Burns, a lot of people calling, and when they don't see the snowplow coming quickly, I mean, you can't get that quickly enough, especially people have to get to jobs, right?
Of course, exactly.
When you have a bad snow like that.
And we welcome the phone calls, no question about it, because it provides me, and I'm certain my colleagues, an opportunity to explain to them in great detail. You know, whether it's called LGDF, whether it's called money from Springfield, doesn't matter to the average citizen. And I consider myself and my family as average citizens. What matters is, does the agreement we have with the state of Illinois for nearly a half a century jeopardize our operations moving forward? The short answer is yes, it does. So how do we convince our citizens to contact their state representatives to say that what you're attempting to do is unfair and it's going to impact us directly?
Well, let's talk about that call to action. Mayor,
Yes.
You just mentioned that. Mayor Tully, what would you like to make sure that your residents of Downers Grove, your general region there that you represent, and the counties beyond, make sure that they know what is the one thing that they need to know critical to the LGDF issue and really the crisis that you could potentially be facing?
In addition to understanding what LGDF is and why it needs to come back into the communities that it originates from, in addition to understanding what the impact would be on the level of services within the community if we took this kind of a hit going forward, I think that residents also need to understand that there's a fallacy to what I've heard repeated at some levels, that municipalities need to share the pain of fixing the state's budget. First of all, this will not fix the state's budget because the state has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So taking our money isn't going to solve it. But more importantly, what they don't understand, and Mayor Burns mentioned this earlier, is that municipalities have already gone through a great deal of pain since the recession and have made significant cuts. Since the Great Recession, for example, the Village of Downers Grove has reduced headcount by 73 positions, or 20% of our headcount has gone down. We've eliminated programs, DARE programs, other programs already, community policing in our town, in order to make sure that our budget is balanced and we are living within our means. So to say that we need to share the pain, I would flip that around and make sure that residents understand that what really needs to happen is, as Mayor Burns mentioned, Springfield needs to learn from municipalities, and they need to figure this out on their own and not on the backs of municipalities.
Well, I want to thank our panel of mayors very much. From Downers Grove, Mayor Martin Tully, Kevin Burns from Geneva, and Glenn Ryback from Wodsworth. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's a critical issue, and we hope that we've helped educate your residents and residents of our region as to the LGDF issue and the importance that it presents to our communities. And a reminder for our viewers to go to protectmytown.us. Let your voice be heard on this very important issue. My thanks to the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference for its support of this program. Again, thank you very much, mayors, and thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you next time on Protect My Town.